Welcome to Coals on the Coast, the podcast where we talk about sustainability, preparedness, and living the small homestead life. I'm Charlie, and tonight is a special night because we're going to have Wayne Cooley, the inventor of the Universal deck. Oh, that's the back of the box. Here's the front of the box. The Universal deck, the deck of the future is what it's called. We're going to have him on, and he's going to talk to us about the deck, how he designed it, and what thoughts he had going into it. All right, without further ado, let's welcome Wayne Cooley to the program.
Hey, Charlie, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Wayne, how are you?
I'm good.
How did you get into game designing? How did that even come up as some sort of thing that was interesting to you?
Well, I started off as a child. We didn't have television. We didn't have other things when I was young. And we used to play card games as a form of entertainment. And I used to play with my relatives, my grandmother, my uncles. And so I got started playing games early because, like I say, there was no TV. It might have been invented, but it wasn't available where I was. But anyway, and so back then, that would have been in the early 50s, there weren't very many people had entertainment that way. And so playing cards was probably a common social activity. And so I learned my card playing skills playing Rook. And that was kind of a family traditional game that was played. As I got older, we learned that I learned other card games and different things. And I'm not sure how I got into being a game designer other than the story maybe about how I developed the deck may help. I used to, after I got married and everything, my wife and I would visit my parents, and as a part of that, we would play games. We played bridge a lot and pinochle and different things. And as a part of that experience, I realized, well, to play different games, you had to have different types of card decks. A pinochle deck, you couldn't use a regular deck with a pinochle deck because it didn't have enough of the particular cards, and some you didn't need. And of course, playing either poker or blackjack or something using the regular, familiar 52 card deck, that was what you played with bridge. And so I said, well, the idea came to me, well, it seems unusual that it's too bad you had to have a different deck of cards to play these different games. And so then the thought came to me, well, I wonder if you could design something that you could play any game with. And over the course of about 2 years on and off, I thought about it. I'd write out different scenarios and trying to figure out how to develop this game or this deck of cards. Really, it wasn't to develop a game. It was to come up with a deck of cards you could play anything with. Well, a Rook deck is numerical. It's 1 to 14. And then the regular poker deck is ace down to 2. A pinochle deck is ace to 9, and there's 2 of everything. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to figure out, well, what's a uniform method of what people know. And of course, I came up with the alphabet. Well, people know the alphabet. And so that's how I started developing the deck. And so I said, well, you got face cards and you got regular cards. And so I said, well, I'll have double letters be like face cards, single letters be like the other cards in the deck. Mm-hmm. And then when you play pinochle, where you have to have 2 of everything, then you just ignore whether it's a double letter card or a single letter card. So that was kind of how I got around that aspect of it. And so I came up with this system. And then I don't know if you want have any other questions at that point, or how I decided to try to make the deck and all that kind of stuff, how to manufacture it. But
yeah, we could lead into that because one of my questions was why you decided to use the alphabet. You've answered that, but the other one was specifically for this deck. It's advertised as being a 6 centimeter by, what is it, 6 centimeters by 9 centimeters?
right, yeah, it was. There was a big push at some point during that development process of people wanting to go to the metric system. It was more universal and international. Other than in Britain and the United States, everybody used the metric system, and so and they were trying to change all sorts of measurements and volumes and things to the metric system. And so, of course, in school, I learned the metric system and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, that would have more of a universal application. So then I said, well, what size, a metric size, corresponds to the original their card decks that already existed? Well, here's an interesting thing is that a poker deck is different than a bridge deck. A poker deck is 2.5 inches wide. A bridge deck is 2.25 inches wide. What happened is, at least my understanding was, the reason that the bridge deck was 1/4 inch narrower was that when you play bridge or some of those other games, you're holding a full handful of cards, and in poker you're just holding 5. And so a lot of women playing have smaller hands, and so to make it easier to hold, they whacked off 1/4 inch off the size of the deck to make the bridge deck. So a bridge deck is different size than a poker deck. Well, so I said, well, right in between there just happened to be 6 centimeters, a good even number. And the length, 9 centimeters, was only a 1/16 of an inch different than the 3.5 inch height of a regular deck. So that's how I decided, well, that'll make another thing unique about this deck is that it has a unique size, and it's right in between the other two sizes. And so that's kind of how that came about. And trying to make it more of a, since I was trying to develop a deck you could play anything with, why not give it an international kind of a flavor to it and use a metric system?
Okay. In that same vein, how did you come up with the bug card? What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, a couple of things. In Pinochle, okay, you have it was in trying to get to come up with the suit, the way the suit was organized, and in Pinochle you have 2 9s, and so if you double up the double A, B, C, and D, E, and people probably don't know what we're talking about, but then in the others, I needed something else that was doubled, and I didn't want to have another face card, and so the bug card in poker in some games, there was a slang term for the two being a bug card. And so I came up and I said, oh, that was kind of interesting. And so then came up with the 6 legs, that's, it's kind of like an asterisk kind of, but and so then that's at the bottom, and that's why I did it. Was so it enabled you to play Pinochle having 2 of everything, and then still having the same relationship between face cards and the regular cards.
Okay.
So anyway, that's where that inspiration came from.
And for people that don't know, these are the style of cards. This is a double card, and this is the single card.
Right. And the other thing, and I think you noticed that the double E's and the double B's, when you hold them in your hand, sometimes you can't tell which is a double E and which is a double B. I took a little notch out of the double E's and the single E, so that when you hold it in your hand, you could tell if if they weren't spread out enough, you could still recognize which was the double E and double B. Also,
There's that
Yeah,
notch there.
that little notch, and the B doesn't. Also, when you play Rook, the 10 card and the 5 card the 10 card counts 10 and the 5 counts 5, and so that corresponds to a double E and a single E, and so that's why I decided to use the E's with the notch out of.
I got you. I didn't know that one, so
Well, I forget probably a lot of the reasons why I did things, but anyway, so that was why that was done.
I know part of the development in this deck had to do with religious sensitivities.
Yes,
And
yes.
It's
That's an interesting story too, because I guess profess being a religious person. And the reason it was frowned upon to use poker cards because supposedly poker cards had the symbols had evil design to them at some point. And I didn't know why or what that was about. But so a lot of people would play different games and use rook cards instead of poker cards. So that way they're not using the cards with evil symbols. And I said, and I, being a religious person, didn't want to get God mad at me, for developing this deck. So I thought I'd better do some research. And part of the research, I went back and found out that cards originated really like 2000 BC in China. And in China, they used to use like denominations of money for the different cards and stuff. And I guess what I read was that back in that time in China, the emperors would have a big harem, and they'd have, I don't know, 100 wives or something in the harem. Well, if you're one of 100 in the harem, your turn doesn't come very often. And so they kind of developed playing games and started with money, and then later made cards so that, to pass the time while they're waiting for their time. Anyway, and then as things went on during the Reformation, back, I guess in Martin Luther's time, and some of those folks that started changing some of the ideas of the Catholic Church, the tarot deck was developed. And the tarot deck has like 22 trumps, so they call trumps, and they all have different symbols on them. And if you've ever seen fortune tellers, use the deck, they'll plop one down and it'll be the death card. It'll have a skeleton on it or something. And anyway, so each one of them has a meaning. Well, the reformers were poking fun at the Catholic Church. One of the cards is a popus card, a female pope. And so that was kind of a sore spot. So the Catholic Church, to my understanding, said, of course, these cards are evil. And so that's the only religious connotation I could find. The regular poker deck is really a tarot deck without the trumps, in essence. Also, as far as the symbols on the cards and stuff like that, I could never find anything that had a religious connotation to the symbols. In Europe and other places, they'll put all sorts of different things. They'll have like a suit of berries or stars or something else. While we use hearts, diamonds, and clubs, those I guess descended from somewhere, but they would use different types of symbols on their cards. And, they used them for all sorts of things. But anyway, so that was the only religious connotation I could find. So I felt comfortable, didn't thinking I was going to offend God by developing this card deck.
Okay. So you mentioned tarot, and this kind of leads into another question, but we'll reach into this one. So the older reference cards that you used to provide with these called out the tarot deck.
Yeah, so, there was a deck which was I think it was a kind of a smaller version of the Tarot deck. And there's a game called Tarok that was popular in Europe at time. I don't know if it still is or not, but which they used to play with the Tarot deck. And so that was my attempt to be able to use my deck, and you could, to replace the Tarok deck, not the Tarot deck, but the Tarok deck, which is a modified version of the tarot cards. And the reason I took it off was because, well, I never found anybody that ever played it. And it was more confusing, and it made things a little more easier to see and that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, it just made the cross references are the common decks. People can probably figure out how to use the universal deck for whatever kind of deck they want to use.
Yeah.
You know, so there's one other modification that I made. Initially, the deck, I printed 60 cards per deck. There were 2 reference cards, and let's see, was there? I can't remember if that's the only. They were the extra ones, but well, there's a reference card that went with each suit, I think.
Yeah,
so that's
there's 2. There's a black and red and a.
Yeah. Anyway, that in the manufacture of the deck, well, initially I had 14 cards in a suit, and that was because Rook had 14 cards. It was 1 to 14 in a Rook deck. And so and that was, of course, the deck I was raised playing with. So I wanted to keep that reference. Well, what I realized was whenever we would play Rook, we thought, well, that's too many cards. We always took out the 2s and 3s, or the 3s and the 2s and 3s. So we took out 2 cards of every suit anyway. So why did I need the extra cards? Because nobody was going to play with them anyway. And so that at that point is when I removed the G card from the deck. And so now it's a 54 card deck when you count the 2 jokers or the universal cards. It's the same number of cards as a regular poker deck or bridge deck. And the other thing it did was in the printing process, instead of 60, you now have 54 cards, and that cut out a whole strip of paper you needed to cut out a deck of cards, one whole strip. So there was an economy there in the printing process. So I'd do 6 by 9, 6 in a sheet, and then the sheet would then get cut up and punched and sized and everything. Maybe that was more than you wanted to know.
No, that you actually answered my next question. So that's so how did you go about getting these cards printed? What was the process with it? How did you design, how did you do the layout and stuff with these, being that it was 1977?
Well, first of all, I don't know if it's first, but you had to find paper. Card paper is not like regular paper. It's 2 pieces of paper laminated together. And the reason is between the 2 pieces of paper, they put it's like a opaque. Does opaque mean you can't see through it? Anyway, a film in there so that when you hold up a card, like a lot of paper, you can look at it and you can see the other side, or something's printed on the other side, it shows through. And so the 2 pieces laminated together with that in the middle, you can't see through it. So, you're playing cards, people can't read your cards from the other side unless they're marked by some way. And so the paper stock itself was this 2-layered card, and then it had the grain of the paper goes a certain way. And so when you shuffle the cards, it has what they call snap. It actually will, come back together. And if you didn't get the grain right, anyway, so I had to find the paper. Well, there was 2 major paper suppliers in the United States. One was U.S. Playing Card, and the other was Water Valete in Michigan that made playing card stock. And the playing cards stock most used was what they call a 10.5 point. That's the thickness of the card. Well, U.S. Playing Card wouldn't sell me any paper because they just use all their paper for their own games. Anyway, so I contacted Watervliet and ordered the paper. Now, the other thing is that the cards all have to be oriented the same way so that the grain goes the right way. It goes to the length of the card that provides the snap when you're shuffling them and that sort of thing and dealing them. And so anyway, so that was the first step. The first step was to get the paper. Then to have it printed, well, there's one other step, and the other step, well, first it had to get printed. And so then it's just like anybody in a printing press. I designed all the things. I made them larger than what they are so that when they reduced them in size, all the edges were sharper. It was clear picture, and so I actually did drawings of all the cards on about 8.5 by 11 size, and then had a printer who that would take the photos and reduce them down and create the printing plates. And so that's how all that was done. And then the final step is they had to have some kind of a coating, or else they would just wear out. The things would rub off, all that kind of stuff. So you had to find a plastic coating. So I had to do research about that and found a company that had several different types of coating that they put on cards. And so what I did is I sent them samples of the paper and had them do little tests. They would do test things on it. They would cover them with the plastic covering, and then they do what they call a rub test. It's where they had some kind of a heavy object that would rub back and forth on it and see which one lasted the longest and had the most durability. And so then I picked a particular coating that looked like it was the best. And then, so the printer, well, actually I had to go to a separate company. So I had them printed, and then I had to ship them to the people that put the coating on. And then they shipped back to me. And then I actually designed, since I'm now using a different size card, I and a friend of mine had to design the machine that would cut them out. So that was another process. And you think back on it and, you wonder, well, was it all worth it? Well, it was kind of fun. But it was quite a process too. And so anyway, I don't know if you want me to go into the manufacturing process and how that was done.
Go ahead.
How long? Yeah. Well, my first printing, I was going to try, I just wanted to see if I could sell them and that sort of thing. And so I got a printer to print 1,500 pages. Well, their printing presses were inadequate. Okay. And so there was enough printing errors in the printing that I only got like 550 decks. Now, to cut them out, I had it's a die. There's a top and the bottom. It's kind of like a cookie cutter. The bottom was a hole, and the top was, shaped in the card. And then I had a hand press, and I cut out each card individually from these. I had the paper, and then I'd cut it in strips and feed the strips through and hand punched each of the cards for that first 550 decks. And so I sold all those. I sold all the first 550 to drugstores and different things. And so I said, well, I need to think larger. And so to get the economies of scales down, trying to make the decks cheaper, I says, well, I'm going to do, I think, 20 some odd thousand. Okay. And the other thing is I needed a better, higher quality printer. And so I found a higher quality printer. And what they did, they actually printed the same image multiple times on each side. So that anytime you would get so it goes through a printer that has like 4 printing rollers. And so they would, if there was any kind of little piece of dust or a little flake of paper or anything would make a little blemish in the printing. And so they would actually hit it twice. So you wouldn't see where there was a little piece of trash or something like that. So anyways, higher quality printing, and printed that many. Well, that's a lot more. I wasn't going to punch those out one at a time. That was not going to do that. So I had a friend who designed machinery for different manufacturers. And so we designed a machine that would punch 15 cards at a time. And then I had to have the die made, and then had the machine manufactured, and it was operated by air pressure. And so I had each sheet would have a deck of cards. Well, I won't go into that. But anyway, basically one sheet's a deck of cards. You cut into 4 pieces. And so I was doing 60 cards. And so there's 15 cards on a sheet, one for each suit. And so I'd put in this press that was air operated. I would position that 15 card thing in there, and then I would activate the press. It'd come down, punch out the cards. There was a conveyor belt underneath it that would take the cards, collect it on another conveyor belt, and then it would go to another conveyor belt, and that was one deck of cards, and then I'd index that one. So I, instead of punching one at a time, I punched 15 at a time using this machine that the friend of mine designed. Anyway, that was quite a process. And then my wife went through every deck, and of course she still had errors, or if I didn't punch them right or something like that, and she inspected all 20 some odd thousand decks or something that we printed. So anyway, and we actually, in order to finance this, we actually sold the house we had, got into a bigger house that had more room, and got enough of the equity out of the house that I could purchase all the paper and and pay the printer and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So anyway, that's the way that all happened. So
I guess next we'll go into the games that you included in the rule book. Originally, the original rule book had like Universal Game 1, 2, 3, and then Solitaire.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, the rule book was redeveloped, and it has the game's elements in Unity along with the Solitaire.
Yeah, what interesting thing I found out, the whole initial reason I developed the card deck was so that you could play any game with it. Well, what I found out was that people would get the deck, and then they would be translating. They would say, okay, double B, that's like a king, or this is like something else. And I said, well, no, it's supposed to be easier. It's alphabetical. Everybody, that's been through school should know the alphabet. So why are you translating kings into double A's and B's and C's and D's? And so I said, what I need to do is I need to develop a new game so that people would play the game using the deck. And then I found that once they got used to the deck, then it was easy to go back and play these other games and stuff. But initially I had to, develop something new that was a new experience. So they wouldn't be trying to translate the stuff into what they used to know or what they hadn't knew into this. And so, all card games are similar in some way or another. And I'd played a number of them. I was in the military, and, with all my relatives and friends and everything, played a lot of different games. And so I kind of came up with a combination. The Universal one was a game where everybody plays against everybody else. And it's similar to games that we used to call like Stomp on Your Neighbor, or what was that? I can't remember. There was a couple others, and I combined them, and then I used the unique characteristics of my deck with the universal cards being, one Joker card had blue and gold on it, and the other one had red and black. And so anyway, so I fashioned this game. And then one of my favorite games that we used to play as partners was spades. And so Universal 2 is a variation on the spade rules. And over time in playing that game, we came up with different variations of the rules and different things. And so initially, that's what those were. Solitaire, self-explanatory. But anyway, so the name change came about. My oldest son always wanted to write books. He was a bookworm as a kid. He wasn't really athletic. And in school, he actually got in trouble for reading in class. The teacher got mad at him because he was reading his book in class. And if you can imagine somebody in school getting in trouble for reading. But one of the problems was that he had a mind like a steel trap. And so the teacher would see that he wasn't potentially paying attention and say, hey, asking the question. And then he'd always know the answer. It just frustrated him. But one of the teachers actually took his book away from him because he read a lot of fantasy books. Anyway, so he always wanted to be a writer, fantasy writer. And so he started putting together all these thoughts and things he had, and he wrote his first book. Well, as he was writing the book and came to the second part, there's a lot of magic involved. And he's trying to think of a way, well, how do people teach magic? Well, then and of course, he was familiar with my cards. And so he says, well, the 4 suits, they relate to the 4 aspects of magic and the 4 different, I'm not sure what you call them, like there's 4 elements of magic. There's air, water, earth, and fire. So then it just so happened that it corresponded to the suit symbols. We hadn't talked about the suit symbols I used yet.
Oh, no, we didn't.
Yeah. What I decided to make it simple, I said, well, and in bridge and even in poker, the different suits have order. The poker order, it goes spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. If people that know what a royal flush is, if you have a royal flush in spades, is higher than a royal flush in hearts, and so on and so forth. And then bridge, when you bid, if you're bidding to beat a 2 spade bid, you have to bid at least 3 hearts. Anyway, people understand that. So I said, well, okay, the suit's got to have order. How do I do that? Well, I always, Rook had 4 colors. And so I thought, oh, that makes sense. What are the 4 primary colors? Well, of course, I used blue. In Rook, I think they use green, but I always liked blue. So I blue, gold, red, and black were the colors. Then there are 4 primary colors that artists use and everything else. Well, and so the first in order, I says, well, how do we designate that this is first in order other than just knowing it? And I says, well, we just use a geometric symbol. So it's a circle. It only has 1 geometric side. So that's why the blue is a circle. And then gold being the second one in order, I kind of like that. We used this 2-sided symbol. And a crescent, the reason you used a crescent was so that the point would stick out the side. Like when you're holding them in your hand, you could see the point. If you're colorblind or whatever, you can see the point sticking out. So you know, oh, that's the gold suit. The third suit in order is a triangle. That's red, and it has 3 sides. And black has 4 sides, and that's the 4th suit in order. So anyway, so those just happen to correspond to the 4 magic. I'm not sure what the term is. Elements of magic. Like say earth. See. Air, water, earth, and fire. And of course, earth is more black, fire is more like red, air is, well, more like gold, really, and of course, blue is more like water. And so he says, I can, in his fantasy book, and in the second book he wrote, he concentrates on that. He used the universal deck as a method for teaching people magic. In his and his fantasy books, they were, they have wizards and all that sort of thing. And some people were born with magical talents. Well, they would, when they found out that somebody had magical talents, they would recruit them and send them to school so they wouldn't misuse it, not knowing they can throw lightning bolts or something and burn down the town or whatever. So they made sure that they had to get trained. And so at the school, part of their training was to learn how to play this game. And we called it elements, that because of the 4 elements and the 4 colors. And then when they got good at that, to learn how to coexist and work with other people, we came up with the unity. That's why we changed that to unity, was because you're playing with someone else. It's a partnership game. And so you need to do things in concert. If you're in battle with somebody, you got 2 wizards on your side, then, you want to make sure that they don't blow each other up or whatever they do. And so anyway, that's why we changed the names, just to correspond with that. And of course, he has a website. He's written probably 14, 15 books, fantasy books, and has done fairly well. Anyway, they're all available on Amazon and that sort of thing. But
and that's Trevor H. Cooley.
That's my oldest son. Yeah. And you can go trevorhcooley.com, or is his website. And that's where you can actually order decks of the cards. All the rules are on there. And then of course you can order his books. And like I say, the deck is extensively used in book 2. And that's because it takes place at what they call the mage school, where the people go to learn how to use their magic and stuff. But anyway.
All right. How many decks did you say were in that second printing? 20,000?
20,000 some odd, I think. I don't know exactly, but somewhere around there.
How many of those do you estimate were sold?
Well, I think I probably sold 5,000 or 6,000 probably, and not a bit. The interesting thing I'm not what I would call a marketing person, but I tried various things. And in fact, we have kind of a cult following. We started playing tournaments with the decks, and then so different places I've lived, we'd get together, friends and neighbors, and even people that we were associated with the church and everything. And so we'd have tournaments. And so all those people ordered decks from time to time. And because of my son's books, I've had orders from, Australia and England and Germany and that sort of thing. The sad part is it costs more to ship them than it does for the deck itself. But anyway, I went to different toy companies trying to sell the idea to them. I don't know how many letters I wrote, quite a few. Most of the game companies, they don't like to do that. I think if it got really popular, then they may approach you and try to work out something with you. But most of the time, they want to do their own, because then they don't have to worry about copyright infringement or somebody suing them because they used their idea and all that sort of thing. And like I say, a lot of games are all similar in some way or another. And so in order legally to be able to, keep from being sued and stuff, that's part of the reason. But I could never get a game company interested in marketing them. And so, and I tried I've tried over time, different people said they would try. But anyway, like I say, we have, kind of a cult following, people that do it. There's even somebody that did a little short movie thing about it. Friends of mine, one of my other sons did a movie about the Universal deck. And, but anyway, so I still have an inventory, and people that request them, then I'll, it's more of a labor of love at this point, because there's not a high volume, but I have people request and order them from time to time. So
now, in some of our prior correspondence, you had mentioned that the Universal, you had called your company that you printed these under as Universal Games.
Uh-huh.
And you mentioned to me that there was a company in Hong Kong that had already trademarked
Yeah.
that name and that you were going to have to pivot to Unity at some point. Can you?
Yes. There was a company in Hong Kong called, I think it was Universal Limited in Hong Kong. And so when I applied for trademarks, was able to, tried to trademark the name Universal for a card game. And they objected to that because of their company. And so basically, we came to an agreement that any of my existing inventory I could sell, but if I was to reprint anything, then it had to be a different name. And so that's kind of what we came down to with that. And so that's why I was going to call it a Unity deck going forward if I got to the point where I needed to reprint, the deck. So yeah, that was I guess a trademark infringement. Now I have trademarked the universal symbol, which is really an infinity sign. That was another thing that I was trying to use as a universal application or international is the infinity sign. So that is trademark, and I've also trademarked the name Unity for a card game. So anyway, so I think legally I'm okay there, but you learn these things as you go through and experiment with this stuff.
Yeah. So one other thing is in your original reference cards, Pinochle is set up the same way that you'd set it up with a regular Pinochle deck, with the king being out of order. So or is it the jack? Whichever one. One of them's out of order. And then in your other Pinochle, I guess it's the 10. The 10's out of order. But then
Right. Yeah.
you
And Pinochle, when you're using Pinochle card, the order goes King 10 and then Queen, I think it is, Jack. And for some reason, I'm not sure why that ever happened. And so I was just trying to initially mimic that. But afterwards, I thought about it. I said, why do this? Why? And so the cross reference, this does the regular, the way I would do it alphabetically and not put the double E after the double A.
Yeah, I guess that kind of harkens back to you didn't want to see people using the reference card and saying, "Oh, this card is the 10," when you could just play it,
right?
Just make your own rank using the cards that you got.
Yeah. The interesting thing was that people started buying the deck because they liked playing the games, not because they wanted to use the deck to play other things.
Yeah.
And so that was another interesting, unexpected thing. Like I said, develop the deck so that so you could play anything with, but then people really like playing the games, and so they started buying the deck because of that, not because of the other reason.
Yeah, I guess you could say it came full circle. You made the deck and intentionally avoided any religious, imagery as not to offend anybody. And then as time has gone on, it's now become associated with Trevor's books, and the magic in those books and the games associated with it. So it's kind of completely done a 180 on you.
Well, in a way, yeah. I don't know that there's any, I guess, religious consternation about magic and fantasies. Like Harry Potter, or any. There's a whole, genre of fantasy books and stuff. So
I know down here in Southern Alabama, when Harry Potter came out, that was a big problem for a lot of people. It's funny how, at least from my perspective, that things have changed so much, and now there's not as big of a.
Well, in my perspective, when you look at poker cards, at one time pool was the devil's game. Well, the reason is that the only place you played pool was in the pool hall, and that was an undesirable environment. Well, then people started putting pool tables in their houses and stuff. Well, there's nothing wrong with pool. It's this. It used to be the environment you had to go in and do that. And poker deck, it's not really because you're playing a game. It's the gambling that's the issue. That people spend their life savings or their paycheck before they get home and all that gambling the money away. So that is really the reason that even poker deck had a bad name. So anyway, it's the way you look at things sometimes, but anyway.
Well, I think that's it from our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about the universal deck, or?
I'm trying to think. I think we've covered about everything. I honestly, I know I can't. I'll probably think of something after we get through. But I mean, you've asked a lot of different questions. I did want to ask you, and I don't know if this needs to be a part of your podcast. One of the things that the latest thing that we did was we did away with the rule book, and now we have a card that I insert in there that has a QR code that you can use to go to Trevor's website and see all the rules. And so the rule book went through kind of a metamorphosis too. Initially, the printing on it was not very good. And so what I did was tried to make the printing larger and more, easier to read and modified some of that. So the later rule books were a lot better. Well, and then of course, then you got to print rule books, and then you got to stuff them in every box and all that sort of thing. So now we came up with it's like a business card, a double-sided business card that I put in any decks now. And so, people can get and look at the QR codes. It also has a little thing in there about Trevor's book too, that has the cards in it. Excuse me. Anyway, so it kind of combines that. And I don't know if I ever sent you any of those, did I?
No, I never did get any of the QR code.
I can't remember. And I guess I probably got your address somewhere. Yes, if you want, I'll send you a few of those and you can see what they look like. And
sure.
I appreciate your interest, and I don't know, how you came in contact. That's kind of interesting. I don't know how you came in contact with it and what piqued your interest, and then you reaching out to me and asking me all these pointed questions.
Well, I'll give a little bit of history on that. I was trying to figure out a universal. So, all right. Apparently, within large gaming communities, a lot of people like to have what's called an emergency game kit. So in case you're stuck in an airport or you're somewhere with your friends, you've always got something to play. And so I was wondering if there was a deck of cards that was already set up that you could play, multiple different games so that you weren't stuck with one particular thing.
Uh-huh.
So I just got in Google and typed in universal card deck, and Trevor's website popped up as one of the things, one of the results. So I clicked on it and I found the universal deck. And there's all sorts of other ones too that people have done, combining chess and backgammon and whatnot into playing cards. But yours was really interesting, being that it was an alphabet and completely different setup from any of the other ones.
Yeah. Well, what was I going to say? Gosh, I had a thought there that you said, that you were looking for that universal application and Googled it. Oh man, that makes me mad. I thought I had a comment that I was going to add about that. Well, anyway, I don't know if you have any other questions. Maybe it'll come to me while I'm sitting here thinking. But I was curious how you came up with, how you found it and that sort of thing.
I will ask this one. Um, the rule book that Trevor has on his website, it says
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to be the final format in Word, and when you pull it up, I mean, it's this little rule book here.
Uh-huh.
But so I'm imagining that you would print that out and then have to manually cut out each one of the 2-page setups and then staple those together however many times to fill in for each deck that you sold.
Yes, yeah, that was a process. Yeah, figured out because you got a front and a back, and then you got a front and the back of the back part of the book, you know. And yeah, I have a whole format of those that I set up, and so and they're all printed on 8.5 by 11 paper. And then I would, I think I'm trying to remember now exactly. I'd cut them into 3 strips, and then you have to arrange them in the right order. Is that how I did that? I'm trying to remember because I remember. Well, maybe it was too. Anyway, and then I would actually. So I'd cut it with a paper cutter, and then I had a stapler set up with a little thing that was, and I'd push it into the stapler, and then I'd put 2 staples in the middle, and then fold it in half, and that was the book. But yeah, that was another problem. That's one of the reasons why the QR code and going to the other, nowadays everybody can look at that. And I think on his website also you can just get the complete verbiage. It's not
Yeah,
in that format.
yeah,
It's
he's
in
got
a
it as a separate page.
regular readable format. But man, Charlie, I wish I could remember what the other thing I was going to mention was. It had to do with it came up when you were telling me how you found it, but
Typing in universal card deck.
yeah, yeah. Oh well, if I think about it, I'll send it to you when I send you some of these inserts. You expressed interest in the G cards, and
Yeah,
I saved a bunch of those just for fun, and give them out as as gifts and stuff to people, but because they are rare. And we have some people who like to play with the full deck and have wanted the G cards, so actually giving those to some people. But
and that
anyway,
was interesting even finding out about those because I was just asking you questions about how you had the deck ending at 4 instead or
it
yours.
goes,
Oh,
F
the
is,
two,
F is,
two in quote was
yeah,
missing, and that's because you had that one mapped out to the G card.
right, right, yeah, yeah. And anyway, like you say, for most games, you don't, the only time you need the extra cards is in Unity if you play with 7 players, then you don't
Okay.
have enough cards, and so. But what we do is we just play the round of 8 and the round of 7 twice if we have 7 players. The issue is kind of interesting that when we play, sometimes it's hard to get people together to play. Say, well, does anybody want to play? And so I say, okay. So we get 2 or 3, and they say, well, and then somebody else says, well, I want to play. Well, I want to play. And next thing you know, you got too many people. And one of the good things about playing elements is that it's flexible. I think the perfect number for elements is 5. And then when we did tournaments, I arranged in tables of 5 tables. Was it 6 tables of 5? And then you could rotate and play everybody during the tournament. You'd play everybody one time, and never play anybody twice. And then at the end, they had the scoring method to determine who the winner was. When we used to play in our groups and stuff, maybe it was a detriment, but the winner of the tournament had the host of the next tournament. And so, and then we'd get together and everybody bring treats and refreshments and stuff. And so it was a whole night of things. And initially we had people that would come just because they thought it was the social thing to do, but they weren't serious card players. And so after one or two games, they'd want to leave, and then that'd mess up all my rotations and stuff. And so after that, we told people, we're serious about this, and we're going to play 5 or 6 games. So, you don't need to come just because you think it's the thing to do or something like that. You got to be committed to want to play. Anyway,
I guess one thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that we didn't talk about was the box. How'd you have these printed? Because that's, I mean, from what I can tell, these look to be, at least mine's all wore out because I carried around in my backpack. But
yeah,
some of them.
That reminds me of what I was going to tell you, and then let's come back. I think the only thing I was going to say is a deck of cards. You can take them they're compact. You can take them anywhere. You can go hiking and camping. And if you don't have electronic means or anything like that, you can play them on in the airport. And we've done that before, waiting for a flight or something. Play them on a bus. You can, we play them on cruises, at night when we're, relaxing from everything. And so a deck of cards is just an easy thing to transport around and very convenient. So that's, another reason why I don't think they'll ever go away, But okay, and then so then that was what I was going to say okay, then you said, what was your question?
How did you do the
box?
Deck box, yeah.
Well, there are companies that, and the regular card companies, there's several different ways that you can make a box. And the box I use is one that, it's something I can fold, and it only has one side you glue. And if you have a machine that does it, then, it doesn't have a flap on the bottom. It can, it just has one flap on the top. But I found the design, had to make it the size of the deck, and big enough so that it would hold the rule book and that kind of thing. Like saying my cards are a little different size. And so anyway, I had a die maker. I showed them the size I wanted, and the die maker made it was like a plywood thing with metal bars and stuff in it. Part of the die cuts, one just makes a crease, so for a fold. And so anyway, and I think I'm trying to remember, I don't have that die anymore, but trying to remember how many cards at a time it would cut out of a piece of paper. So you print it, and then there's a machine, just like a regular printer, that would actually, you put this plate in there, and it would cut the sheets. And then you just have to assemble the boxes. And so the box I used, you had to glue one side. And then, so that was another process, going through and gluing all the one side of the box. And then we'd just stack them up and put something on them to hold them together until the glue dried. And then you fold in the bottom and then put the other stuff in and fold the top. That sort of thing. So that was another part of the manufacturing process and part you had to go through. So if I was to do this again, or if I was to had the not the motivation, but if it was necessary or needed to do another printing, I'd try to contract a game company to do it for me, and then try to find one that would do my size. If they'd have to change a die or something. And me and my friend designed another machine that would be automatic, that would actually take the whole sheet, cut the sheet in strips, feed the strips through the die, and cut them all and arrange them in a deck. But you never got to. We didn't have it. Didn't sell enough of the other decks to make that necessary. But I actually designed the machine to do that, but never made the machine. But I think what I'd do is try to find somebody that and see if I couldn't get them to go to the universal size, then I'd probably sacrifice that for bridge size or something. But I don't know. It just makes it unique. Anyway, that was the whole purpose and reason behind that.
All right. Let me ask one clarification on one thing.
Okay.
The design of the cards themselves, those were all hand drawn originally.
Uh-huh.
And then when you send that to the printer, when they shrunk them down, they adjusted that some, or?
Yeah. Well, I made them so that they were, what do you call it? Symmetrical. I mean, so that when you reduce it down, just like you do on a copy machine or anything else, that it would be the right size. I made, the dimensions were proportional. Mm-hmm. And so the reason for making them big and full size was, if I'm drawing with a pen and then filling it in with ink and that kind of stuff. But, that if I tried to do little tiny things, they wouldn't be, the symbols wouldn't be that crisp. They wouldn't look that good. But if you make them big enough, a little mistake just goes away when you shrink it down. Okay. So it's probably shrunk about to less than a quarter of the size of the sheet that I initially did. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I did that.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you for your time and for going through this.
No problem.
How these got done. If anybody wanted to purchase a deck, where could they reach you at?
Well, my email is, of course, you then go to the Trevor's website and the information's on there. But my email address is wanaco.inc, WANACO.INC@gmail. And that's how I get the requests. And then I usually respond like I did to you and send an email back saying, here's how many do you want, and here's what the pricing is, and where are you in the world. And that depends on the shipping. I try to ship as many decks as somebody wants, and to make it as cheap as possible. I don't I did, like I said, depending on where you are, sometimes the shipping costs as much as I ask for the decks. I'm not. And I think I'm trying to remember now. I think decks are like $5 or something a piece, but shipping can be maybe more than that. It just depends on how many you order. Because the larger quantity you order, then I send you a bigger box, and the post office will send. I can send one of those all you can put in their boxes, and I've got that all figured out. But now I have people that'll order, 20 or 30 decks at a time. Sometimes they have friends, they give them away as gifts, especially if they've been in some of our tournaments and have played some of the games and that kind of thing. So, but anyway, that's the way you can get in touch.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Hey, Charlie, it's good. I appreciate I appreciate your interest. And who knows, maybe your podcast will go wild and we'll have more to talk about.
Yeah, maybe so. Hopefully
all right.
We can sell you some more decks.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
All right, Wayne.
All right, it's good talking to you. All right, good night.
All right, that was our talk with Wayne Cooley, the designer of the Universal deck. I hope that was interesting to everyone. I know it was interesting to me, but not everyone's interested in the manufacturing of different card games and how you would go about doing that, why you would have design aspects. But if you want to get a deck from him, just visit him. Either go to Trevor's website. Hold on, I'll pull that up real fast so everybody can see. Or you can email him at the email that's rolling across your screen now. Like he said, he'll get back to you and send you Hold on, let's see now. If I do this right, I should be able to present this. I'm going to share my screen. One second. Oh, baby. Let's see. All right, you should see it now. This is Trevor's website. This is trevorhcooley.com/universal card deck. And you get on here, it gives you a little bit of the history, and then it'll tell you how he incorporated this into his book. And then you'll, as you scroll down, you can see you can send an email to this email here, or you can email Wayne directly at the one on the screen. So, all right, guys, I hope you have a good night. And, well, for people that aren't on the screen and that are on the podcast, you can email Wayne at WNA. Sorry, hold on. It's WANACO.INC@gmail.com. So that's his email. I'll put the link in the description in the Spotify and all the different podcasts. And I'll make sure that when I upload this to YouTube, I've got all the relevant links. And that way, if you want a deck, you can get one. And I'll put Trevor's information too in case you want to check out his books. But anyway, y'all have a safe rest of the week. And until next time, this has been Coles on the Coast.